bjuda på 100 programpunkter som avlöser varandra. Var 20:e minut är det ett nytt spännande ämne som det diskuteras, samtalas om och debatteras. Det första frukostseminariet är 45 minuter. Och det är Svenska kyrkans internationella arbete som startar här och också bjuder på frukost. Men innan vi släpper igång dem ska jag bara nämna något av vad som händer här senare idag. Klockan 10 så kommer Sveriges syriska riksförbund hit. Och rubriken är Den syriska diasporan och kampen för mänskliga rättigheter. Därefter 20:10 så ska det handla om en inställd utgivning av satirmagasinet Charlie Hebdo. Och klockan 12 kommer Cecilia Udén hit. Hon är här varje dag klockan 12 och samtalar kring spännande frågor. Men nu ska jag lämna över till Svenska kyrkans internationella arbete. Rubriken är Civila, samhällets möjligheter att verka i ett begränsat utrymme. Och ni ska få presentera er själva. Men vi börjar med en välkomnande varm applåd.
Good morning and welcome to a breakfast seminar. I hope you have had time to greet the neighbor sitting next to you. My name is Jenny Zetterqvist. I'm a policy advisor from at the International Department of Church of Sweden. As you saw in the program, Gunilla Hallonsten should have been the moderator for this seminar. She apologizes for not being able to come and send her regards, and I will step in instead of her. The seminar, we will speak in English, and the seminar will address the issue of enabling environment for civil society. And I will give you first a short introduction to the topic, and then I will introduce the panel, and we will start a dialogue around the theme. And when I now have your attention, I would also like to inform you that after the seminar, when we have closed, you are welcome to continue discussion at our exhibition area. It's down there to the left. So, as a background, the topic, an enabling environment for civil society, is one of the thematic areas of Church of Sweden in development and humanitarian assistance. It includes attention to the importance of an independent, a vibrant and a creative civil society navigating a work for sustainable development, for gender justice and for peace. It has always been part of the work of Church of Sweden to accompany people and a variety of actors as members of civil society on their route to reach their aims. However, for a period, extra attention has been given to the current situation for civil society members and a number of challenges that have surfaced in different countries affecting their operational space. Challenges that include different kind of operational restrictions. At the same time, there are also examples of creativeness amongst people and civil society to navigate within a context of small spaces, to facilitate people to meet in forum where they could feel safe, to share their experiences, and also to be able to organize themselves. And this situation is reflected in alerts we get, in reports from our partners, for example, in the Latin American context, and in international networking of Church of Sweden, including dialogue with partners in different parts of the world. These networks have published reports and arranged seminars to raise the awareness of the situation in general, and also to alert governments on the importance to be in active dialogue with civil society and to give attention to its diversity. So, now the purpose for this seminar is to reflect on the issue of space for civil society and how to navigate in a small space to make what we all aim for a change. And I would like to introduce now, for this purpose, we have invited a panel, and they are standing here next to me. And I am happy to welcome Benjam Getanhe, Program Manager for Life and Peace Institute and their Ethiopian program. Welcome. And a welcome to Peter Weiderud, Director for the Swedish Institute, Alexandria, situated in Egypt. And then a warm welcome to Anna Maria, liaison officer of Church of Sweden in Nairobi, but covering Horn of Africa. So, then we start our panel discussion. And I would like to start with inviting each of you to give a kind of a short introduction to your work and introduce yourself. And what kind of my question is, what kind of civil society context you relate to in the work? And if we start with you, Benjam, if it's possible, if you can say a few words also about the legal setting and its implication for civil society. So I start with you, Benjam.
Thank you very much. As been mentioned, my name is Benjam Getanhe. I'm the country program manager for Life and Peace Institute in Ethiopia.
You have to speak.
Life and Peace Institute is an ecumenical organization working on peace building and conflict transformation. We do research and action together with civil society support. We have worked with different local organizations in Ethiopia to create some sort of an opening for peace building work to be possible in Ethiopia. Because in our country there is a legislation that prohibits international organizations from working in peace building and conflict issues, but there are still ways of working with partners like universities. So whenever you have these legislations, rather than seeing them as obstacles, finding opportunities to work with other groups that can have a multiplier effect in the society was important for us, that we intended and tried to partner with universities that are federal institutions, but which host a microcosm of the bigger community in terms of student bodies that they have. So we've been able to work with university students to create safe spaces for them to dialogue over bigger conflict issues that refer to them on a daily basis, and when they go back to their communities also. So that's life and peace work in Ethiopia, most of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then Peter Weiderud, would you like to introduce yourself and the context you are working in for the audience?
Yeah, my name is Peter Weiderud, and I'm a director for Swedish Institute in Alexandria, which is a quite unique part of the Swedish Foreign Service. 20 years ago, that was at the time when the Cold War has ended, and we were in the beginning of seeing a kind of new tension in the world between the West and the East, in terms of the predominantly Christian West and the predominantly Muslim East. Sweden had the experience, of course, as a country outside of military alliances during the Cold War, to see the risk of false enemy images, to see the need of dialogue, to make sure that we are not losing the political opportunities in dialogue. And based on this experience and seeing what the risk of seeing a new tension, a new rift, the Swedish Institute in Alexandria was formed, to be a space for dialogue. And dialogue means to us that you don't talk about each other, you talk to each other. You also have a dialogue with issues that are not only important to yourself, but also to the one you are talking to the adversary. You need to make people feel safe to discuss the burning issues. So it is, you can say, a soft part of the Swedish Foreign Service, where we really try to bring people together, government representatives, researchers, civil society, to discuss burning issues that are burning both for the Middle East region, but also for Europe.
Thank you. And then, Anna Maria, it's your turn to introduce yourself and the context you are working in.
Good morning. My name is Anna Maria Sandström, and I work for the International Department of Church of Sweden. I'm based in Nairobi, in Kenya, and I work with our partners in the Horn of Africa region, majority of them being faith-based. And my focus is on South Sudan. Being present on the ground means that I'm close to our partners. I'm able to link the partners' work to our church office and the national work in Sweden, as well to our global advocacy through the EU and the UN. But the context in the Horn of Africa is very much about lack of peace, maybe especially in South Sudan and Sudan. Kenya is host to the largest refugee camp in the world, and the number of IDPs, the internal displaced persons in the neighboring countries, is very high. Therefore, promotion of peace and reconciliation is one of our priorities in the region. Further, you have the unemployment that's very high, especially among the youth. Land grabbing is rampant, and huge areas are rented out to foreign nations for agricultural purposes. You have the extractive industry, which is flourishing, too often at the expense of poor communities and the environment. The growth rate is, however, comparatively high, but the wealth is divided unequally in the society. To address some of these issues, Church of Sweden works through partners with sustainable livelihoods at local and structural level. But there is also a lack of gender equality. Not all are allowed to have a voice. And in many societies, women don't have a voice. When that is the case, the information you receive reflects the view of some 50% of the population only. If you imagine in your mind a room, a boardroom, where decisions about people's future are taken, made every day, but the room is only half full because every second chair is empty. So I think sometimes it's necessary to reflect on who is actually allowed to be heard and sit on the chair, who makes decisions on behalf of others. Church of Sweden, in our work, we try to integrate gender equality, gender justice in all our work. Recently, or not recently, but we have seen, our partners have seen signs of a shrinking operational and democratic space in the daily work. For example, in the proposed new legal requirement, which contains financial limitations and restrictions on number of expat employees you can have. We have seen this in Kenya, in South Sudan and Uganda. And we have become aware that some issues are more sensitive to advocate for than others, like human rights and gender justice, whereas climate justice seems to be more okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we can see here that there's a variety of contexts our panel represents, and the challenges are there. But the purpose for this seminar was to find a way to navigate and work in such a context. And we have heard that they have touched upon dialogue as a methodology. And we will now enter into discussion regarding dialogue as a methodology and other kinds of ways of giving space for sharing and strategizing. And I would like to start with Benjam again, because you mentioned that you have entered into the universities as an arena for your work. And if you could develop or elaborate a little bit more about the methodology you use and what kind of experience you have from that.
Thank you very much. In the university context, we have a flagship project called Sustained Dialogue. A group of students selected by, the University Peace Club work to come together, get training on moderating, dialogue sessions, and also who are, participants also are divided into both male and female students in equal numbers, and we have in a group 12 students, and these students come together every 2 weeks for 2 or 3 hours to discuss and dialogue over issues that matter to them and that drive violence in the university campuses. Most of the time, these factors that drive violence in the campuses also drive violent conflicts within the bigger communities they come from. So they go through a year-long process of dialogue in a safe space. The dialogues are student-led, and they go back to their communities with skills of skills and knowledge of the importance of understanding other perspectives rather than having rigid kind of understanding of others. So that promotes a sort of reach out to other community members, because when they go back, they are listened to by their community members, are the more enlightened ones. So that has an effect on themselves as individuals, but also in their communities back home when they go back. So although we are talking about issues that drive violent conflicts within the university settings, because they are similar to the community settings, they have the possibility of having dialogue around these issues, even though they may not be able to do them in a more formal way outside the university campuses, but they will affect the views and attitudes and behaviors of their family members and their community members. And that way we thought that we could find safe spaces for individuals and civil society forming and working towards peace building. Although the legislation states that civil society organizations that are international will not be able to do that.
May I ask a question for clarification? No, another question. Peter mentioned that to him dialogue means that it's important to talk to each other and not about each other. And could you say a bit more about how do you address, do you include that kind of approach in your methodology, and what is behind that you do it?
Yes, before we even begin the dialogue sessions in the university setting, what we do is do a scoping survey to understand the issues that drive violent conflict in the university setting, and based on that understanding we select people who should be involved in that. For instance, if it is intolerance towards religious bent, then we focus on the different religious groups, members of the different religious groups, to come with their own views and perspectives, and then share their perspectives and get understanding of each other, rather than pointing fingers at each other as they used to, saying this religion is not the right religion, or this is not the right one.
Peter, you have also in the institute work on dialogue with different stakeholders in the society. how do you do the dialogue? And who do you invite? And what kind of topics do you discuss? What kind of topics is possible to discuss?
I mean, we are working in a very large region, starting from Morocco to the Persian Gulf. So there are many countries involved, and also many conflicts involved. So we have no difficulty finding the problems to address. Our problem is more to see where can we make a change, where can we really focus. There are some areas that are sensitive to discuss in the region at the moment. One of the issues where I would consider the absolute necessary to discuss much more is the understanding of political Islam and how we deal with political Islam. That is at the moment extremely sensitive, both in Europe and in many countries in the Middle East. And there you have to find good ways to make sure that you enter into the issues that are difficult to discuss. Other issues that are not so difficult to discuss, still very urgent and very important, are violence against women, youth in society, and these kind of issues, where it's relatively easy to bring people together, and it's relatively easy to improve the dialogue, both involving government officials, authorities, civil society, religious leaders.
And what are the reasons behind that? You say it's more easy to involve people in that kind of discussion, gender-based violence. Why?
I mean, conflicts is almost always about power or economic reasons. These are the root causes of conflicts. It's not gender, it's not religion. These are expressions of how to exercise your power. And the power issues that are sensitive are, of course, the platforms that people are holding on to at the moment and in a different contexts and conflicts. So I would say in the Middle East at the moment there is a window of opportunity to move the gender agenda. And that we need to do, of course, as an actor in the Middle East, to see whatever we can do to improve the situation. So there we use the momentum and move in the best that we can.
Okay, thank you. Anna Maria, do you have the same experience as Peter is talking about here, that there is a moment of momentum to actually take the gender issues further?
I think this is an issue that is, you feel it differently on different levels.
Yeah.
I think on the more governmental level, and maybe it's different, it's much easier than on the ground, where the grassroots are and where we mainly work, because there we feel it's a big challenge still.
Do you have any example on methodology that is more structured way of working with the issue, addressing specifically gender-based violence?
Yes, I can share with you an example from our partner, Feklaha, which is a fellowship of churches and councils in 10 countries in the Horn of Africa and East Africa. They started a campaign 10 years ago called the Tamar campaign, breaking the chain of silence and to stop violence. It's a campaign, Tamar is from the Bible, from the book of Samuel, where the girl Tamar was raped by her half-brother Amnon. And she's seen as a symbol of strength because she did resistance. She didn't keep silent about it, which you should in the society very often. But the campaign is about you to acknowledge that there is gender-based violence in the society and to spread awareness about it, to start talking about it, to challenge the churches to address the problem, to speak out against abuse of women and children. So through the campaign, the church leaders are educated and encouraged to network also with other civil society organizations. They learn about the link between gender violence and HIV/AIDS. And since the church is respected in the local society and has a very far-reaching network, they are uniquely placed to play a big role in the prevention and elimination of different forms of violence against women and children, and also to provide spaces for healing of victims. Yeah. There is also the concept where they use a Bible study manual to address different themes on gender-based violence.
Would you say that the Bible study is kind of creating kind of a space or safe space for discussing sensitive topics?
Exactly.
Both for religious leaders and for women and men together.
It's like a small space where you're allowed to discuss these issues.
Yeah. And is the methodology used for 10 years or so now, or?
It's used for 10 years, and it's currently being revised to fit into the context we are in today. Because we must also know that we have done so many, we have progressed a lot. Yeah. There are lots of positive developments when it comes to gender.
You mentioned specifically religious leaders as an important stakeholder to involve in the work. And I know from the description of the work in the institute, Alexandria Institute, Swedish Institute in Alexandria, that you also specifically mention religious leaders as an important stakeholder in building networks and cooperation activities between civil society and other groups. So, Peter, what kind of role do you see that religious leaders can have in general in addressing issues and specifically addressing sensitive issues? Do they have kind of a bridging role?
Now, in the Middle East, of course, religion is very present. This is a region where all three monotheistic religions have their roots. Religion is natural, is in the society, is everywhere where present. And it's not considered as a private issue that we very much look upon religion in the European context, which is, that is another discussion, but that is a very narrow and superficial understanding of the religion to only see the private, because religion is really talking about identity, is addressing moral, is really in the fabric of the society. So of course, if a Christian man beats his wife, it's not because he's a Christian, it is because he's exercising power as a man, and of course to work with him, you can use the language that he understands and the motivation that he comes from, and it's of course extremely efficient. But when it comes to religious leaders, of course, they are more at the top of the society, and they are extremely influential and can of course also change the political context. I have experienced that myself in Cyprus, where I have worked for a good number of years with the main religious leaders in the Cyprus conflict. They stopped talking to each other in 1963 in their functions when the conflict got hot. And I brought them together, the Mufti and the Greek Orthodox Archbishop, after 45 years of silence. And started very slowly, secretly in the beginning, got them to meet each other, talked to each one of them, trying to understand where they were coming from. And it took some years of trust building between them. But then they started to realize that they have to change. When they only talk for themselves and for their own needs, when the Archbishop is repeating his need to come to his churches, when the Mufti is repeating his needs to go to his mosques, and they are stuck in the same national discourse as the political leaders, they can't reach anywhere. But when they start to talk together, and they agree on principal issues, and they address these principal issues in line with human rights law, that this is a universal right to have access to your places of worship, to go there, etc., then they can start to be influential. And when they reach even a further level, when the Mufti is starting to ask for the claims of the Archbishop and the other way around, then they can really make a change. And when they do that, they also move the societies. The Church of Cyprus, for example, has been with the extreme nationalists in the history, and they have been against any negotiated solution because they wanted the absolute solution. But now they are in favor of a negotiated solution, and by that you have moved the whole society towards the center, and that can of course help now to reach finally an end of the Cyprus conflict. So in this region, religion is extremely powerful and should be taken very seriously.
And you mentioned the importance of building trust And I would like to go back to you, Benjam. The issue of trust, is it something you work on specifically, informing these groups of students in the university area before they will be able to enter into a more structured discussion on certain topics they feel of importance?
Yeah, as in all, conflict settings, the conflicting parties need to, have some sort of trust among one another, for them to come together and sit to have dialogue over issues that they have.
Yeah.
So, one thing that helps, the sustained dialogue project that we have in ADES is that we focus to a certain and in fact to a bigger extent on opinion leaders among the student communities to come together, and these are strong-willed people who want to send their message across forcefully, but once they come together, sit down and start having this free space for them to dialogue over the issues, then they start bringing up issues, serious issues, but these are misconceptions to most of the time, so they start beginning to trust one another, and they start relating to one another on an individual basis, and they start growing as friends. Seeing that also the bigger group that they are mobilizing will also trust one another, because if our leaders are doing this, then it's okay for us to do this. So the trust aspect is very important also in the dialogue.
And it's it seems to be a combination of trust aspect and a space that communicate safety or safe space.
Yes.
Yes. And is it something you recognize also, the issue of trust?
Yes, it's essential, I think. It's very important.
I was going to say, Peter mentioned it could be very helpful to be guided by human rights principles in the work. But I would like to go back to your context again, Benjam. You mentioned when we talked yesterday about another kind of documents that could help in taking issues further, and you entered into a problem of land issues and policies that actually were at place but didn't work. How you use that policy to take the issue further. Could you explain a bit more about what that was about and how you used the policies?
Yeah, still working with universities, we were able to work very constructively with them to identify some of the issues that are plaguing, communities surrounding the universities. And when they did, the analysis, most of the conflicts happen to be, caused by land-related issues. And when they understood that, they started working with the local authorities around these issues. And they asked, LPI, Life and Peace Institute, to come and help technically on how to make it, a workable, implementable kind of project. So we designed a project, a pilot project around conflict-sensitive land administration. And then after the training they received from us, they started realizing during the discussions in the training, they started realizing some of the problems emanate from the policy, the land policies that the government has. Not that the policy itself is bad, but it's not workable in their context, because there were some provisions of the land policy that stated, for a plot of land to be assumed as a farmland, it has to be at least half a hectare. But the land holding in that area was a quarter of a hectare on average. So they were having difficulty, understanding it and using it, to implement the policy in that context. So they started thinking about how they can influence the policymakers and, take up the policy issues to the higher level.
So actually capacity building activities like trainings also is kind of a tool for dialogue.
In fact, most of the things that we do incorporate capacity building.
Yeah.
So
I would like to ask you to reflect a little about a question I would like to address to all of you, and that is based on your experiences from your different contexts. What is the 3 most important components to establish kind of a climate or environment for dialogue on sensitive topics? What would you say, given the context you are working in, what would you say are the 3 most important components? And you can be at a very local level, or you can be at a higher level. Would you like to start, Peter?
I think if I were to pick 3, I would say the first one we touched upon, that's trust.
Yeah.
You need to be sure that people trust you if you should provide a space for dialogue. And you need to have the dialogue partners to trust each other as persons, as individuals. And that takes a lot of investment. You have to take time, you have to listen, you have to relate, and you have to meet them where it's possible to meet them. In some cases you have to avoid legitimizing, of course, particularly when there are crimes involved. But trust has to be there for anything to succeed. The second is, of course, not to embarrass. Then you can't reach anywhere. The dialogue will break, which means in my context that some meetings cannot be public. They have to be discreet, or they have to be with shut-up house rules, as we say. We can refer to what is said in the meeting, but not refer to who said it. So the discreetness is extremely important. Then the third factor I would like to mention is the need not to exclude. In any peace process, you need to make sure that you have all the relevant actors involved. If you exclude someone, you don't want to talk to someone because you don't like him or her, because you don't like that group, what they are standing for, etc., they will come back and hit you. You can't reach anywhere. And if they have a significant backing, they will hit you hard. So that is, I think, extremely important, and that is maybe what is at most risk today, because we have a tendency in world politics today to look for exclusion, the language of withdraw ambassadors, don't talk to that one, consider this group untouchable or terrorist, etc. This is extremely difficult because it makes peace work impossible.
And Anna Maria, the 3 components you see as most important. When Peter talked now, I was thinking of the empty chairs. You mentioned briefly in the introduction.
Yeah, it's about participation. Who participates? I think it's important that also that you have a gender balance in these discussions and dialogues. But Peter, your answer was very comprehensive. I agree with the trust, and that maybe to add that it's more important to listen also than to have your own agenda. It's important to listen to the other one.
And the same question to you then, Benjam. You have heard the 2 other panelists now. Is it something you would like to emphasize more or add on?
Yeah, I mean, concurring with all what they have said, I also think that there are other issues that we need to consider. The first most important thing is, analysis. That leads us to understanding the context, understanding who are involved, and then that gives us, the possibility of targeting who to work with and how. The second is, once we understand who is involved, why they are having these troubles, then we need to also try and work with, opinion leaders for us to be able to create some sort of trust, in us as well as with each other. And then once we have the trust, then we can guide, the dialogue, but without antagonizing anyone, giving open space for them to freely air what they need.
Now I see 5 fingers. We have touched upon very many aspects, I think, in this panel, and I would like to start the closing of the panel by asking you, each one of you, a question. And I would like you to think of how you could summarize what you have picked up from here. But before I give you the question, I see that we have touched upon dialogue as a method, but there is a need to discuss it a bit more, I think. We touched upon capacity building also as an approach, but it also has some methodological components. And we have also mentioned that in a church context, Bible study could actually give some kind of safe space for discussing sensitive issues as gender-based violence. And all this has to do with methodologies, but behind that we have also mentioned different kind of actors. And I think in the university areas it has been focused on the youth. And we have also mentioned government officials and religious leaders. And if we would like to, we could actually also emphasize different kind of, what we say, rights holders. As a women is a rights holder group. It's also a group to include. Now, if I take the closing questions, I would like to start with you, Anna Maria. And if we go back to the issue of civil society in a broader sense, what do you see as crucial in your context for work for promotion of an enabling environment for civil society in general and for gender justice specifically? 1 minute.
1 minute. I will just shorten it up a bit. 2 things. A vibrant civil society is not possible without gender equality, gender justice. I wanted to take you back to the boardroom, but I will actually skip that passage. And more generally, I think that there is no room for divisions between churches and other parts of the society. We need to work together. We need to be inclusive and work also with the other civil society actors, like the new coming, the enterprises even, the universities, of course, and the UN and the governments. Yeah. Thank you.
And for you, Benjam, what do you see as the key component in sustained dialogue, the methodology you use, that contribute to strengthening what we call interaction between people and also securing space for a vibrant civil society in peace building?
Well, I think the fact that, sustained dialogue has been able to create a safe space for, the future leaders, that's the university students, who go back with an elevated status to their communities, will have an impact on the bigger and wider community because they are listened to, and that could help change, you know, the societal fabric in the community.
Thank you. And Peter, in the current situation, what would you say is the most urgent issue to address in a long-term perspective to protect an enabling environment for civil society in the region?
Let me give two advice to civil society, because the role of civil society is extremely important. I think two advice that I would give from my perspective is, one, to work very systematically with human rights law in their advocacy, to frame whatever they are doing within the conventions, within the Universal Declaration, within the human rights law, in order to get international support for what they want to do. The other one is never forget to work with people in the system, no matter how difficult the system is. There are always individuals there that can use their ability to make change. I have myself gone in and out between government and civil society my whole life, and I have really discovered how important it is what you can do when you are inside. But you don't have the clear mind when you are inside. That has to come from outside.
And now the time is out. We thank you very much for coming and listening. And you are welcome to our exhibition area in the corner down there, close to the restaurant. We will continue discussion.